Who? Okay, so sorry guys.
Let me see. I'm doing it. I got it.
You got it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay. All right.
I
Well,
don't call you CIO for nothing. This is proven.
I know. It's technical. I'm technical.
All right. Thanks. So with that, Marie, take it away.
Okay. So thanks everybody for joining, and just want to make sure my windows are all there so you don't have to look at my to-do list. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So today we're going to do part 2 of the sort of understanding and some of the ideas around cognitive services. I like to call this one a not so definite presentation because it's such a new industry. And I'll cover some of the aspects that are new, and Maureen will cover some of the aspects that are new in her field. But it's fascinating because what we've learned is AI and computing can actually cover many, many other fields than what is typically kind of discussed in the scary sci-fi version of what AI is going to do to all of us. There's a lot of other things that are happening too. So with cognitive services, the goal is that we're building an intelligent machine learning-based application to interact with humans and focus on vision, speech, language, and knowledge. Now, this is not a foreign concept because this is also called your smartphone. But there are many, many other ways to embed machine learning and internet technologies into devices and ways of living. So what do these things look like, right? What do cognitive services, what do their designs look like? So this is from Brown University. They talk about, it's really like an interdisciplinary focus, right? Which is computational, it's cognitive, and it's also about neuroscience, right? Which also is, neurodiversity is a subset of neuroscience. And then there are a number of factors we look at, which is instead of trying to centralize a design around a norm, you actually decentralize the design and you specialize for different segments of the population. And so that's what you kind of see in computing happening right now. So you look at cognitive, computer science, ergonomics, engineering design, sociology, psychology, ethnography, cognitive science, psychology, information security, and speech, language, and pathology. And you look at both strengths and weaknesses in the particular population that you're addressing, and you create a holistic design for that population. So that's a lot of what Data 360 is doing, our DEI and accessibility practices, work with nonprofits, work with underrepresented founders and other underrepresented workers in the tech industry. How do we begin to use these as different levers to design a system that will cater to a particular market or particular opportunity, right? If you're able to see all the things that are happening in a market as opportunities versus a yes or no, right? So we're moving away from this binary place to a much more multilateral, multi-process, parallel processing place when it comes to computing. And so, you know, we can take all these different factors and not have one dominate the other, but create a inclusive design is really the point. This is the messy one. Inclusive design is not a one size fits all. It covers so many different areas in terms of how you can address strengths and weaknesses and different kinds of opportunities. So, you know, whether you're in ecology or economics or artificial intelligence or mathematics or media or design or sociology or web engineering or sociocultural factors, law, all these things fit in a decentralized, collaborative, multi-processing, parallel world, right? So the goal is to make sure that as you're addressing your niche, you're really looking at it from different lenses, but it doesn't have to be, it can be all the lenses in yellow, it can be all the lenses in orange, it can be all the lenses in green. It can be mixes of those, but there are many, many options. Again, if you think about it as far as levers in a machine, you can actually design so many different variants of what can happen. And you can pick a focus. You can pick a focus based on your strength to address someone else's weakness, or you can pick someone else's weakness to address your strengths, and blah, blah, blah. So this is a fun kind of wild, wild west of computing that's happening right now. And I'll show some examples of what that looks like. For neurodivergent users, there are two primary groups that are focused on in a lot of systems. So this is an example of design. So design for users on the autistic spectrum. You want to use simple colors, for example, as an example of how to accommodate sensory overload. Don't use bright colors. Write in plain language. Don't use figurative speech. Use simple sentences. Don't create a wall of text. Do make buttons that are descriptive. Don't make buttons that are vague and unpredictable. Build simple content and layouts, but don't make cluttered layouts, right? So if you're actually catering to people that are on the spectrum and you're addressing that audience, you want to be careful about how you design and work with things and develop your systems for those on the autistic spectrum. And then design for users with dyslexia, you want to make sure you use diagrams and text. Don't use a bunch of heavy text. Make sure and align the text to the left and keep a consistent layout. Don't use underlined words or italics. It kind of confuses how they can read. Consider producing materials in other formats, for example, audio or video versus just text. Don't try to force the users to remember things from previous pages. Give reminders and prompts. Make sure you keep the content short and simple and clear. And don't rely on spelling or autocorrect to provide suggestions. Again, it boggles the mind when you're dyslexic. Let users change the contrast between background and text, and don't put too much information in one place. So I'm sure all of you can pick sites in your mind that violate these rules on the regular, right? And that's because they're trying to address a norm versus addressing users in different ways. So what's great about this information is there's just huge amounts of opportunity in computing, in big data, in AI, in machine learning to address all these different neurodivergent issues and actually cater to these audiences and develop whole new economies around these audiences. And that's why we have Maureen here to talk about some of those things she's doing with her systems and what she's up to. Cognitive systems mimic and support human experiences in the best of all worlds. So when, for example, you're looking for neurodiversity employees and you want to create software or design a customized software training, you might want to look at how things are screened, right? So what's the screening process look like? How is it designed? How does it flow? You can look at applications, interviews, meetings, working environments. You also want to make sure you conduct a verification of assumptions, right? Making sure things are understood and making sure things are clear, making sure there are reminders and notifications and some of the things we just talked about. And then you also want to make sure you confirm truth, right? Because in a collaborative world, a decentralized, non-normative world, you're talking about, there are many truths, right? There's your truth versus someone who's neurodivergent, that's their truth, right? Just like there are cultural truths, right? This applies to cultures, this applies to gender. It applies to a lot of different aspects. So you want to make sure when you're working with a neurodivergent population or you're working with any kind of diverse population, you're confirming the truth. What is the truth? And making sure that you're aligned. So instead of saying that this is the truth or this is the fact or this is how it's supposed to be, you want to create alignment rather than dominance or hierarchy. You also want to look at different development of different management styles and leadership styles that are supported by software and supported by process, supported by workflow. So you want to make sure that your software and your training are both taking care of these kind of issues, and that as you're developing these systems and you're taking advantage of these opportunities, whether you're a consultant or you're a company or you're a nonprofit or any of these things that you're addressing these populations, right? And you're looking at it from these different lenses. So again, neurodiversity is not the only lens, right? There's gender, there's culture, and so on. There are lots and lots and lots of corporations that support neurodiversity now. There are many more to go, but you can see that, AMC and Ford, GameStop, Home Depot, HP, Freddie Mac, Chevron, Chase, Microsoft, Salesforce, Walgreens, so on and so forth, all support neurodiversity, meaning that they all employ and work with neurodiverse populations, either directly or through agencies or through particular programs. So now that we're kind of oriented to this world, I want to take a little bit of looking into the deeper aspects of neurodiversity. So typically there are 5 categories that are, or 4 categories, and then sort of plus other that are considered part of neurodiversity. So there's dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, and the other category, which include a lot of different definitions. But the best thing about each one of these is that now there's a ton of information that you can use to actually inform your design. So for example, one is actually just economic. Every 10 people, 1 out of 10 people are dyslexic. It's a huge population that's being left out of this new world, right? And have to use different devices and systems and things like that. And so there are 700 million dyslexic people worldwide. And despite the fact that 10% of the population and despite being 10% of the population, twice as many dyslexics are actually unemployed. So as far as the economic opportunity is concerned, I mean, it's just huge, right? And this is a really great site. I'll put the link to it. It just talks about, what are their strengths, right? How can you work with dyslexic people, right? And what are good jobs for dyslexic people if you happen to be an employer? Who are examples of people who are dyslexic? There are actually a lot of famous and millionaires and billionaires that are dyslexic. And also, what is it that you can do? How can you learn more about it in courses and things like that? So this is on the Exceptional Individual site. So there's a really wonderful YouTube channel that goes into every single major neurodiverse category and actually talks about all the strengths and weaknesses and how to work with them. So Maureen is going to provide some insight into how that works with her population of autistics. The other thing I want to mention is, so there's 2 halves to the equation. There's the thought, the design, and the process. And then there's also what are the tools, right? So I just want to talk a little bit about AI tools. We didn't go into this during the first session as much as we could have. So I just want to take a little time to talk about kind of what are the tools you can work with to start to work with this population, right? And program things or hire programmers who, can be working with you to create new opportunities in these markets, right? So there are 5 main categories of AI tools, and this is the world according to Microsoft. There are lots of other tools, but in this world there are 5. And so machine teaching is one. Text analytics is another. Language understanding, right? Not just language translation, but actually the understanding of how sentences are configured. And how different aspects of language used in an application can be configured. Then there are video indexers, which include providing intelligent insights into video. So say if someone has a deficit in reading or processing information, you can put together systems that will give insights to the video that you're using. And then lastly, there's computer vision, which can extract visual data and provide context. So a lot of neurodiverse people need additional context for items and for things that they do every day. And so each of these tools actually provide that extra meta language, process, workflow, the ability to change the workflow dynamically within the machine without someone having to do it manually. So each one of these is there. And so in the link, you can try these things out, which are a lot of fun. But I'm not going to play every single thing, but there's a lot of different systems that are out there. You can see that this one is a model for an autonomous city or an autonomous building system. And these things can also address neurodivergent populations. So we're really excited at Day 360 to begin to explore how these different models work, because it's just such a huge opportunity for so many people to be addressed. And so you can see how that works. You can see what different things happen. There's machine calibrations. There's all kinds of models and error checking and sensors and things that can be developed for different populations, right? So if you're looking to get people to work and you're looking at how to activate new populations to support different economies, you can use some of these demos to kind of explore what would that look like and think about how to utilize some of those strengths and weaknesses. Some of the other things that are out there are text analytics. As I mentioned, so for example, you can help. One of the things, for example, with autistics is we all have a problem detecting sentiment and detecting emotions a lot of times, and so some of these situations like sentiment analysis and key phrases and understanding the relationship between entities is huge for people who are on the spectrum. So you can see here that this text analytics tool can tell you that this particular text is neutral, right? So for example, if you're looking to communicate with an autistic person, or you're looking to understand autistic, or an autistic person is looking to be understood, sometimes we might say things that are not clear or seem very negative or strange. We can check ourselves and be able to say what is actually happening, how is this working, is this the right thing to say? So these tools are, not just kind of far out in terms of AI and how it's analyzed, they're actually very practical. The last thing I want to cover is there are lots of other tools that are out there that we can talk about at some point in the Q&A or in chat or via the text links. There's also the world of wearables. So like your Apple Watch and Fitbit and all those fun things can actually be used in a context for neurodivergent populations. It is a huge market for innovation. And then if you're wanting to explore this, we're partners with Microsoft. Microsoft has a really great AI school that just tells you everything under the sun about potential AI applications, courses on how to create them, beginners, intermediate, advanced, doesn't matter. You can just learn all kinds of stuff. So we're really excited to start sharing a lot of that with our community and with you guys. And then in addition to that, if you do actually have an idea, there are new grants that Microsoft is offering around education and employment, community, and home for people who are developing applications. So right now, this new one is due, it's October, gosh, I'm already at the end of the year, March 12th, actually in 2 days. If you're looking for proposals they're looking for proposals for advanced AI innovations in education to empower people with disabilities. And then you can obtain a grant to actually learn more about those particular ones. And then there's a whole video trailer about that and what actually happens. So check that out, and you get Azure Compute credits. And you can actually reach out to us if you have any questions about these and when the next ones are coming up for the public to work on different grants for different accessibility issues. So really excited that we can share that with you guys. And I think that's pretty much my time. I think I'm trying to make sure we don't drone on and on, because I'm excited about the stuff. I can talk about it for a long time. But I'll hand the mic over to Maureen.
All right, thank you, Marie. That was compelling as always. And Maureen, go girl.
All right, just give me a second here to share my screen.
You might have to unshare, Marie.
All right, so my name's Maureen Dunn. I really appreciate Marie's fantastic presentation. I'm a cognitive scientist by training. I've got my doctorate in cognitive science from the University of Oxford. And so a lot of the programs I'm going to talk about, which we won't have time to talk about really in detail from this perspective, but actually have been informed by cognitive science principles and also a lot of the technologies that Marie has been talking about. There's some partnerships in place, but my talk is really focused more on some more applied program development. And the title is called Building an Educational and Economic Infrastructure that Supports Neurodiversity Inclusion. And there's two particular programs I'm going to be really talking about. There's the Transition to Success Project, which also partners with Autism Community Ventures and Inclusive Coding Academy, which is a pre-accelerated program. And there's the Autism Angel Group, which funds ventures and startups that include individuals in the autism spectrum, as well as funds innovation in the autism space. So I'll start out with the Transition to Success Project program. Transition to Success Project, it's a program that its goal is really to bridge the gap between high school and college, or apprenticeship or job opportunity, to keep students with autism from falling through the cracks. And you know, here's just a basic overview of, you know, some of you may be aware that under IDEA that there's the transitional support services end with high school graduation or age 22 if the student remains in high school. And one big challenge for college leadership is just scaling some of these support services, because there's just such a huge need that's not being met. And one of the goals of the Transition to Success Project has been to really augment community support and partner with colleges to promote student success and offer sort of essentially wraparound services that will help autistic students be successful in, again, either transitioning to college or a work or apprenticeship opportunity. And here's just some statistics that might be helpful in just thinking again about this issue for students. So what we know is, you know, over 70% of public two-year colleges currently enroll autistic students. More than half of all college students with a disability attend community colleges, yet general support services are only offered by 42% of the institutions, while 26% of institutions are able to supply what we would, you know, what we can think of as autistic specific services. Only 34.7% of students with autism start college within 6 years of high school graduation, and only 38.8% of autistic students will graduate. Now that's a bit of an old study, but that's in 2011, but still you get a sense of just the overview if you were, you know, at first focusing more on higher education programs. And so I had founded this project called the Transition to Success Project in Temple Grandin. When I had met with her, was actually, you know, very supportive of it, because there's a real part of the program is making sure that this transition from high school to college, or it could also be used for apprenticeship or work opportunities, where there's a consistent mentor, that there's you know, how it works now is sometimes doesn't work really well, just because there's gaps in services and supports, and According to this, with this model, you have a set of resources where the student, it's portable. They, each autistic student can take it to the college or work opportunity of their choice. And it's very, customized supports to help with student success. And so part of the Transition Success is it's a community-based program. So each student gets $5,000 to start as a high school, and then again, it's a portable grant that applies to the college or work or apprenticeship opportunity of choice. And there's a regional bridge coordinator that really helps that student understand what resources are available at the community level, whether they're transitioning to community college or a university, what's already available, and then to help augment those services and just be sort of a point of contact, right? And serve as a mentor in trying to help the student navigate the resources that are needed to, they're in a customized way that to help for success. This just gives you a sense of some of the resources that are available. There's, if you look at the yellow, in the circle, sort of the outer yellow one that's highlighted in yellow, those are mostly the extra layer of support services that are funded by this program. And so it's, very customized and individual and personalized to the student in terms of what they need and what their goals are. And it's very much a strength-based program. We very much see each student as in terms of their strengths, and try to help support them in the way that they feel really is best. In terms of criteria for the award, so here's just some of the criteria. There's primary diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Students should be in their last semester of high school or last year of transition, and intending to be in college or an internship, apprenticeship, job opportunity within 6 months. We recently extended this program to entrepreneurs. So, a student or a high school graduate could apply to receive some funding to explore an entrepreneurship project, which I think is well, I'll talk a little bit later, about the autism angel groups, which we believe is an alternative pathway to successful employment. And there's other criteria that the award committee looks at. Strong potential for independence with additional supports, one of them. This just gives you a sense of just an overview of what we found in our research to be some of the challenges. It shouldn't be the case that the statistics are as low as they are. I mean, we know that there's so many amazing cognitive strengths that this population brings to the workforce and the college, and so we try to understand, well, what are some of the challenges that could help with support. And so here's just some examples of what we found. And in terms of some of the resources that the Transition Success Project funds, here's just again examples of that, of what students have found to be helpful. Things like time management coaching, has been really helpful for a lot of students. A lot of it, as you could probably see, has nothing to do with academics. It's more other types of support that a lot of colleges don't currently offer. And what we found too is just even with things like private tutoring, that a lot of the colleges, even though there's a lot of wonderful resources that are being offered, that they're still, and this brings in sort of the cognitive science perspective of some of this, is that there's still maybe an underappreciation for what these students really need. And so, for example, there may be private tutors that, if it, I'll just give an example of a student that needed help with English, and was having some challenges and difficulty in his English course, but it wasn't that he needed to be paired with an English tutor necessarily. He really needed to be paired with a tutor that understood the very unique strengths and challenges that he was facing and how he processed information and his very concrete way of thinking and organizing ideas. And so we ended up, matching him through this grant with a tutor that really came from a more of an, executive functioning specialist background, but also had the background to be an English tutor, which was very successful. And so this is just the first cohort of those grants. These are the resources and supports that were requested. Most of the time, transportation actually was, in some cases, really important too. There was one student that just brilliant student, but ended up, he had to take like 2 or 3 buses to get to class, and that was a huge challenge. And so just having options, broader transportation, he didn't drive, so broader transportation options made a really big difference to just him being able to focus on the things he was really super strong on. And so there's also part of this program, there's these inclusive coding boot camps. And so these have been so far grant and donor funded, where there's coding boot camps in it for everyone over the age of 16, but there's strong emphasis on including, being very much an advocate for neurodiversity, and including at least one autistic individual in each team. And we've had a number of different coding boot camps. Here's an example of 3, so we've done web design, intro to Python, and rapid prototyping, including 3D printers. So we're looking at like emerging industries that where there'll likely be a lot of employment opportunities in the future and now as well. And we also had employers that, came in and talked to these students, which I think was really helpful, to especially like Microsoft and some other employers were able to speak about all the different types of interesting career opportunities that exist that are beyond engineering, right? And tech, technology, what you would think of as traditional technology careers. And so I think that was very helpful to a lot of the students that attended. And we had a intro to gaming workshop, which attracted autistic students that were, really interested in gaming, but hadn't coded their own games before. And it was pretty, amazing experience for a lot of the participants. The grand prize for best game went to an autistic student, and he was prior to that point, I think, really discouraged in a lot of ways, had struggled a lot. This is a very common experience, right? For autistic people, just very discouraged about employment, had applied for a lot of jobs and wasn't finding much success. And it was just kind of wonderful to see him realize his value and realize how talented he was through this experience. And some of the evaluation indicators, we've been looking at is being fully committed to program completion. And if you remember, when I talked about statistics, at least when you look at higher ed, they're lower than you would expect, in terms of completion rates, but with extra, sort of resources, and also being very customized. So it's not the individual can decide what's right for him, what makes sense for that person. But here's some of the indicators we've been looking at. And then, just going back to what's also just really important is developing an infrastructure for financial inclusion. I believe, and I think Marie would also agree, that that's just really, really important, I think, for the neurodiversity movement, right? It's not enough to be advocating for inclusion initiatives in higher education. We need to make sure that there's also an appreciation for these really amazing minds in the workforce, and they should be included, and there should be many options for financial inclusion. Um, and you know, one of the I think issues is making sure that businesses, and more businesses, as Marie sort of mentioned, I think are really starting to understand and appreciate the value of neurodiversity and being in these brilliant, unique minds and different sort of skill sets that have so much to offer. And so, but seeing it as, you know, as a competitive advantage even for business. And this is just a quote from SAP, as executive SAP, the Autism at Work program is basically having people who see things differently, maybe don't fit in seamlessly, helps offset our tendency as a big company to all look in the same direction. And just, I think that's just increasingly going to be such a valuable skill as we're entering a phase where there's just going to continuously be really rapid changes in the workforce due to automation. And as Marie mentioned, you know, just these really interesting advances in AI and robotics and automation. And along with that, we're also, there's going to be changes, right, in the employment landscape. And it's going to be all the more important to be advocating and appreciating the value of unique minds that, you know, maybe don't always fit in, but sort of think outside the box, right? You know, I think this is just a huge unaddressed economic opportunity too. I mean, it's I think we can all agree it shouldn't be the case that as high as 85% of autistic adults remain unemployed, or what we would call underemployed. And when you look at college graduate statistics, it's not any better, right? And I think that's something we all as advocates really need to seriously address, you know. And yet, you know, there's so much need, right? There's all these like manpower, for instance, that 40% of global employers are still struggling to find the talent they need. And what I think we all understand is that neurodiversity is a massively underrepresented talent pool. And there's many cognitive advantages, especially for autistic job seekers. You know, just one example is just superior pattern detection. There's been decades of research looking at superior performance on different types of pattern detection skill sets, including embedded figures tests. Also at JP Morgan, there's been a number of pilot studies in different autism at work programs, JP Morgan being one of them, and they found there was not only a 99% retention rate in the program, but that autistic employees were 48% faster and 92% more productive. So coming to then, as Regina mentioned, I am the co-founder and managing director of the Autism Angels Group. And, you know, my co-founder and I, we came together on joint forces because we really felt strongly, we realized there's such a huge need to recognize the talent, the untapped talent that's out there. And there's so many autistic people in the world that have such unique talents, and not all of them are necessarily going to fit into a company, even one of these, you know, autism at work programs. And we think there should be many different pathways that are available to success, and entrepreneurship is one of them to consider, you know. And really, you know, if we look at throughout history, so many of the pioneers and innovators throughout history really have been neurodiverse, right? And so this is not actually in a way anything new, but just I worry sometimes about how many people out there, especially autistic innovators, that could be really changing the world, that maybe don't somehow find the right pathway because they don't sort of see a clear pathway. And so part of what we're doing, you know, trying to do is again, going back to this concept of financial and economic inclusion, is offer some alternative and unique pathways to inclusion, and entrepreneurship being one of them. And so the Autism Angel Group, our mission is to bring together capital and talent to aggressively drive economic opportunities and technology-driven solutions that create a positive social impact for the autism community. And for us, there's a couple of different situations that we are really passionate about in terms of committing funding to. One would be a startup or innovation that is just it would be super important to the autism community, that would really be a value add and make a great social impact, and also a financial return to our investors in the autism community. And we would expect and encourage those companies to always include autistic employees and job seekers too. That's a big part of what we're passionate about, is again that that inclusion aspect, and that advocating for an inclusive culture. We also believe that, and again, many of the pioneers throughout history have been autistic or neurodiverse, and we're open and supportive of neurodiverse entrepreneurs, whether they have autism or dyslexia or ADHD. So entrepreneurs, neurodiverse entrepreneurs, we will fund as well. Also, it doesn't have to be, just would add that it doesn't have to be a company that's specifically working on a product or innovation that's about autism. It could be AI, it could be data science, it could be robotics, it could be a financial product. We're pretty open as well, as long as that company is including a neurodiverse team member. It could be a CTO or some other C-suite role, or truly including a neurodiverse individual in an important fundamental role in the company. So those are the the different types of companies we'll fund. You see here's pictures. My co-founder and I, we come from we have different stories and backgrounds, but we're both just been lifelong advocates. And so you see some pictures from our experiences. And so here's Kathy Farmer. She's my co-founder in the Autism Angel Group. And me, and these are our email addresses. And just to elaborate a little bit on the criteria, in case there's anyone watching that is interested in applying the Autism Angel Group, we invest in solutions that benefit the autism community and/or include at least one founder or core team member who's been diagnosed with autism. And so you could kind of read over just all we as other angel groups expect. We usually would expect at least a minimum viable product to be able to show us with some traction and a solid business plan. But we also offer a lot of mentoring. So we get just earlier today, there was an entrepreneur, an autistic entrepreneur that was really early stage, didn't really have a product yet, but something we also do is just a lot of mentoring and coaching and helping, especially autistic entrepreneurs, sort of navigate the possibility of entrepreneurship. And there's many different routes again to entrepreneurship. And so we get involved, very involved in either the companies or even some of the companies we haven't funded yet, just with this mentorship piece. And I also would mention, so we're working now on raising funds. So we have the Autism Angel Group, and then we have a nonprofit that funds some broader educational initiatives and microgrants and fellowships. And then we're working in the process of raising money for a social impact fund. And with all of these different initiatives, our goal is, the investors, of course, will expect a return on investment, right, with, you know, financial returns, but they're also social impact investors. And so what we're working on is social impact reports where, in addition to any financial returns, that we are measuring the social impact of the investments we make. And that includes, you know, a number of individuals that were able to get and retain jobs, right? Neurodiverse job seekers, improve life satisfaction, all sorts of indicators that are way, you know, beyond financial returns. Here's just giving you over. We have a lot of partners, and we're always interested in collaborating with new partners that could help us sort of develop this ecosystem and further the mission of just joblessness and also just really making a positive difference in the innovation ecosystem for autism. And here's an example of some of the partners that we're currently working with. Stanford Neurodiversity Project, one of them, Organization for Autism Research. They're actually our fiscal sponsor for the nonprofit sort of sister organization of our fund. And you see here, you know, some others. And so, yeah, that's, you know, all I have. Here's my email address. I know that we'll have a Q&A session now, but you know, absolutely feel free to reach out and send me an email if you're, you know, you have any questions or interested in exploring any of these programs. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Maureen and Marie. So I think in the interest of time, either put your questions in chat or just unmute yourself and ask questions, whatever's best vehicle for you. Bob, I'm sure you have questions.
You got it, Regina.
I know you. I know you.
That was really great. Thank you so much, Maureen, for that information, and Marie too. This was a very good overview. Lots of good information. So I understand dyslexia a little bit. I realized when my daughter was very young that she should not be having trouble reading, and she was. And through a lot of research, I got her to take the Slingerland test for dyslexia, and she passed with flying colors. And I tried doing a one-on-one tutoring program with her, the Barton reading system. And that ended up being such an emotional crash between parent and child that I managed to get her to a specialty school, which changed the way her brain was reading and, you know, spelling at the time. So I understand dyslexia. Then later on, she had some issues. And the dyslexia expert I worked with said, just don't go to a pediatrician about ADD or ADHD. Go to a psychiatrist who has some deep experience and understands the meds, which, you know, fortunately we were able to do. And that really helped her also with the anxiety and depression that come with those things, especially in high school. But I don't really understand how what is the diagnostic process for autism these days? I'm kind of curious because I'm a coach and I have a couple of clients, and you know, they've managed to get through okay, you know, somewhere on the spectrum, but they weren't diagnosed until 41 years old. And then their mother was diagnosed, you know, in her elderly stage. So what's the latest on testing and diagnosis as far as like that would work with the DSM, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Marie, do
you want to take that one? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
actually, yeah, go ahead.
What's considered the gold standard, right, of diagnosis is a system called the ADOS. I don't know if you've heard of it, right? It's the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. Now, there's been, I think, in recent years, some criticism, not just of ADOS, but all the sort of even the DSM different criteria, just because a lot of the original research, if we go back many, many years, it was focused, and you can understand why, but still it was focused a lot on boys, And so there's, you know, if you're looking at gender, there's, in terms of late diagnosis, it seems to be the case that there's a lot more women that are more likely to be late diagnosed because they weren't, some of these instruments didn't sort of perfectly capture their experience early on, because how it manifests in girls is very different than how it manifests in boys. And so we're starting kind of like to just learn, you know, I think it's sort of in recent years that's sort of come to light a little bit, but the ADOS is still, I would say is, you know, there's different screening instruments, like the MCHAT, you know, that pediatricians use. And then, you know, if you go into full diagnostic sessions, then it kind of depends on what kind of specialist you go to, right? So a psychiatrist may do it differently than a clinical psychologist too, right? And so, but there's different methodologies. If it's certainly for a clinical psychologist, most likely they'd be using the ADOS measurement. And you know, I think it's you know, as I'm sure you've known, there's been an increase of, I mean, the diagnosis has increased quite a bit, not just among children, but adults in recent years. And I guess just, you know, some of the concern is just that there's a lot of people that maybe were not initially detected, you know, earlier on, because some of the research instruments didn't sort of have in mind this, you know, the ways in which autism spectrum disorders might manifest more broadly, especially for girls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that. There are some, I was diagnosed via ADOS late in life, and I was actually approached to join a genetic study group by Spark Autism Research Group. And that's been a very interesting process, because we are regularly pinged by MIT and a number of groups for different kinds of tests and different kinds of things. And it's always dreadfully interesting to me, because they seem to hone in on the very thing that drives me completely bonkers in the test. And so I know the test is designed for people with ASD. So there have been hearing tests and pattern tests and a number of, you know, sort of daily routine tests. But yeah, it is very hard to diagnose. It's very hard to diagnose for women, because women are taught coping mechanisms to sort of like hide what they feel, or hide what's happening, or hide different things. And it was funny, I got asked a question in one of the research surveys recently. When you hear this, do you feel like you want to be violent or lash out? And I thought about it, and I went, absolutely. When I hear that, I do want to be very violent, but I don't, because I'm taught as a female, like that's not an appropriate reaction. So I'm so used to masking that. But yeah, I definitely feel that way. Right. So there's that. And then there's a lot of things, you know, as a person of color, like there's a lot of things where families of color just don't know anything about neurodiversity is thought of and taught and handled in such a very different way than it is in Caucasian communities. So, you know, it just doesn't get registered for a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people that are a lot more neurodiverse than we think. Because there's just so much there. And the DSM is very limited, because it's from one perspective, right? And so Maureen is absolutely right. You know, the best thing, you know, if you have a clinical psychologist, you know, we have UCLA here with the Terry Simmel Institute. And if you have a clinical psychologist, you know, that can observe you over time with multiple tools and instruments, that's the ideal situation, but most people can't afford that. You know, that may be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, especially if you're not a child. You know, who's going to cover that? No insurance company is going to cover that. You know, like, do you work? Okay, great, bye. they're not going to cover that kind of situation. And I know that's true for, dyslexia is a little more obvious. ADHD is one of those as well. And, ADHD can be comorbid with autism, and OCD and a number of anxiety, depression, other things. So it can be tough. I mean, it's the brain's a tough thing.
Yeah, with one client, a young man around 30, it took a while, not too long, to it just come to the heartbreaking observation that he's so tough on himself, so self-critical, that over his lifetime, he's kind of let people down, let him, just it's not worked out the way he thought it should, like other people. So I'm so glad to see that you talk about all these resources, especially around building up the the sort of mental strength of people with ASM.
Yeah, and then if you have supportive services that where so-called sort of normies can learn, okay, oh, I'm talking to a person who's neurodivergent, let me switch it up and let me deal with this a different way, or whatever, or there are systems for the neurodivergent person to access the so-called norm, then life becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of there's these intermediaries, and so that's where we kind of see this. As she mentioned, Microsoft's a partner for both of our organizations. Seeing these systems as intermediaries to resolve some of the conflicts to where it doesn't have to go to such an extreme measure where then psychosis is developed and mental illness is developed and all these different things are developed, right? Or, you have to spend 20 years learning how to speak to the public, as I did when I was, I didn't learn how to speak in public. I mean, this is recent, sort of the last 15 years of my life, I learned how to speak to the public, and it was like hell on earth for me to learn how to do what I'm doing right now. And I have to really focus on it. So, being able to do that is all these things are, I think these technologies are critical, and the ecosystem work that Maureen is doing is critical. Both of those go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think also just the public becoming more aware of just how wide of a spectrum we're talking about. Like I feel like the media focuses on examples that aren't really representative, and that makes it more difficult because then I almost feel like some of the there's a lot of people that still have real challenges and need support, but because they maybe don't fit the mold of what they've seen in the media, or they're super, intelligent, and they've got so many strengths that it's harder for those individuals to go seek the help or support they need because they seem like they have so many advantages, but yet it's just uneven. There's uneven skills there, and I think just the more people and examples out there that we could all see. We see this sort of the diverse and interesting talent, and it's not just all, Rain Man or, it's not, it's not,
everybody says Rain Man.
That's right. I mean, it's kind of like some people just have such a narrow view, especially of autism, because of what they've been exposed to. We've all, it's just how bias and perception works. Everyone sort of wants to categorize these labels in their minds, and I think that's probably made it much more challenging, especially for women who maybe on the surface seem much milder, but still need support in other ways, and but don't sort of fit what society kind of sees as being on the spectrum. And then, also just, I think, a lot of what Maria had said too, I just would echo. I mean, and I think we also need to I think it's important to just be extremely, for everyone to be extremely respectful of the dignity of the individual, and respectful that, everyone at the end of the day has strengths and weaknesses, right? And it's just, neurodiversity, it may just be more extreme, right? You may see more extreme talent and other challenge. I mean, everyone's different, everyone's unique, but I worry that there's so much talent that's out there that's not sort of, participating in solving some of our problems in society, and some of these really unique minds, maybe they're not, these individuals will struggle with social rules or social hierarchies or other things, but we need to find a way to have, or they have a pathway to fit in and be included, financially, economically, in a meaningful careers, because it's just too important. I think it's a disservice to the world if we don't.
Yeah, I think we can. I can't echo that more strongly. I think we can accelerate the solutions to a lot of the things that we're going through as we develop more supportive systems and ecosystems for neurodivergent people. And I think too. I know as a neurodivergent person, the relief that I felt once I had a name and a label and something to look up and things to attach it to, I was like, okay, all of these weird things make sense. And I think there are a lot of people walking around, as you mentioned about your clients, there's a lot of people walking around with all these kind of things. They think, I'm a weirdo and I'm never going to make it or whatever. And they just don't understand that there's probably something in there, there's a connectedness to who they are and how they function, and they just don't know how to handle it. And so like my anxiety, I still have a lot of anxiety, but my anxiety went way, way down 90% of the day because I know how to articulate what's happening to me. I can connect the dots. And sometimes it may be fast or slow. A lot of times it's slow, but sometimes, I could say I have a lot of environmental issues and things like that. So people say, oh, you speak so well and you're not like Rain Man and all this stuff. And I'm like, come live with me. If you live with me. Now my husband knows, right? And my kids know. We like Maureen was saying, there's so many different, we can all have so many strengths that can mask things. It's just, we have to begin to, have systems that see each other, ask questions, and, like I said, really redefine what the truth is and what normal is, and, what these different aspects of systems actually are in order to really help people.
Right.
And access the economic opportunities that we have before us.
Mm-hmm. And for the employment piece, trying to train employers to see, beyond sort of maybe superficial interviews where some of the talents may not come through properly, right? And there might just be sort of, the social demands might be getting in the way of understanding what kind of talent that they really could leverage in their company or organization. Trying to get past those biases are also a challenge I think we could all work towards.
Excellent. Are there any other questions for Maureen or Marie? Maureen, I know you can reach out to them. So I know they're not shy. Power ladies.
We're advocates.
Your advocates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for such a great session.
Yeah. Thank you.
But that's
You're welcome.
Maureen, you're in the stop recording if you would. And
Okay.